My Minnesota, a fading memory. I remember a different Minnesota. Growing up here, I felt safe. The Twin Cities were vibrant and full of life. People took pride in their communities. Today, that Minnesota feels like a distant memory. The streets I used to roam freely are now littered with tents and despair. The parks where we played as children are now havens for open drug use. What happened to our cities? How did we go so wrong? Broken promises. The failure of homeless and mental health initiatives. We were told that compassion meant providing housing without conditions, that mental health could be addressed with handouts instead of treatment. We were sold a lie, and the consequences are all around us. The streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul are now inundated with homeless encampments. Many struggling with addiction and mental illness are left to fend for themselves. Well-intentioned programs have become enablers, attracting more people in need without addressing the root causes. Instead of breaking the cycle of poverty and despair, we've created a system of dependency. We need real solutions, not band-aid fixes. Open wounds, drug use, and neglect on our streets. The human toll of our failed policies is evident on every street corner. Discarded needles and human waste serve as grim reminders of the crisis we've allowed to fester. Open drug use is rampant, with addicts shooting up in broad daylight. The sense of lawlessness and despair is palpable. This is not compassion. This is neglect. We can't afford to ignore this problem any longer. We need to prioritize public safety and restore order to our streets. Section 4. The erosion of accountability, a city adrift. The erosion of accountability has permeated every level of our city government, from lax enforcement of quality of life ordinances to a reluctance to prosecute even serious crimes. A culture of impunity has taken root. We've seen businesses shuttered, residents fleeing, and tourists staying away. The consequences of this inaction are impossible to ignore. We must demand better from our leaders. We deserve safe streets, clean parks, and a government that prioritizes the well-being of its citizens. Section 5. The perils of misguided compassion. We were told that compassion required us to tolerate all behavior, no matter how destructive. But true compassion demands more than empty gestures and blind tolerance. True compassion requires us to confront difficult truths, even when it's uncomfortable. The policies we've embraced in the name of compassion have often had the opposite effect. They've trapped individuals in a cycle of dependency and despair. It's time to rethink our approach to compassion. We need to embrace policies that empower individuals to become productive members of society. Section 6. A city lost, from flourishing hub to shadow of its former self. The Twin Cities were once a beacon of hope and opportunity, a place where people came to build a better life for themselves and their families. Today, that legacy is at risk. The decline is evident everywhere you look. Boarded-up businesses, once pristine parks now littered with trash and needles. This is not the Minnesota I remember. We must act now to reclaim our cities and restore the promise of a better tomorrow. Section 7. A call to action, reclaiming our cities. The time for complacency is over. We must demand better from our elected officials and ourselves. We must reject the failed policies of the past and embrace a new approach rooted in common sense, compassion, and accountability. Here's what we must do. 1. Demand accountability from our elected officials. Hold them responsible for the consequences of their decisions. Vote for leaders who prioritize public safety, personal responsibility, and effective solutions. 2. Support law enforcement and first responders. Advocate for policies that empower them to do their jobs effectively. 3. Reject the normalization of lawlessness. 4. Support organizations that are making a real difference. The future of our cities depends on our willingness to act.